if you can practice good feedback now, you will be such a valuable employee 10 years from now, because people don't know how to give good feedback. They don't. So if you can figure this out now, I'm telling you, it is a secret sauce to make a lot of money later in your career. Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast, where we help you build your dream team. Right now in the podcast, we're going through a series about my new book, Master Your First Job. I wrote this book for first-time employees to help them get the most out of their first job, but it's also for employers, both as a resource for the young people you employ, and I think there's some great secrets in there that will help you manage young and first-time employees. This week, we're talking about how to give and receive feedback as a gift. This one, probably more than any other one, is especially important for business leaders and business owners and young people and first-time employees alike to learn. So let's dive into my conversation with Addie, talking about how to give and receive feedback as a gift.
Hey, Jacob. Today we want to talk about Chapter 7 of your book, Master Your First Job.
Boom.
This is all about, the title is Feedback is a Gift, all about feedback, some steps to take if you are struggling with it or don't know what to do with it, how to give it, all that stuff. So tell us first, before we dive into all that, who is this book for and why'd you write it?
Yeah, so my book officially came out, gosh, by the time this thing will come out, 2 weeks ago. So
Yeah.
It's been out for 2 weeks. Who's the book for? Well, Addie, as you know, most first-time employees don't know how to successfully navigate their first job opportunity. They get hired, they hopefully get trained, and their first job becomes a line item on a resume and nothing more. You get a paycheck, maybe some gas money, and that's all your first job becomes. And I think I mentioned last week, I was on a Reddit thread. I was researching stuff about first jobs, and I just saw someone say, someone was asking where the best places for young people to work for their first job, and the first several comments were just, it doesn't matter. It's just a job.
Right.
And that really upset me. And so I wrote this book for those people. I wrote it because there's not a lot of resources for first-time employees of how to get the most out of your first job. And so what I lay out in the book is a remarkable path from first day to first promotion. And I want to help you get from your first day at your first job through your promotion and really set you up for a career-long success by practicing the 10 things I talk about in the book. So super proud of the book, and I think it's really applicable for first-time employees. But to be honest, a lot of the feedback I've gotten from people reading the book so far has been that even beyond first-time employees, people are finding value in it, both as a business owner. I had a business owner tell me they felt like this was a secret weapon to help him get the most out of his first-time employees, which
That's
is amazing.
awesome.
And I had another person who's just working a job. They worked there over 20 years, and they talked about how they were re-inspired at work and had a new fire at work to represent themselves better at work in their career. And so super grateful for the positive feedback so far. I think there's a little bit of something in this book for everybody.
Yeah. Well, speaking of feedback, let's get into it. What led you to view feedback as valuable for not only personal growth, but also professional growth as well?
Yeah, feedback. Number one, I think it's important we define what feedback is. Feedback is simply a response to an action that happened, right? So we'll talk about it in a little bit. Feedback has a negative connotation, and I just think feedback is simply a response. And so I think people giving responses to actions that happen is so important, both for personal growth and for every organization, because if you're not getting responses on what's going on in your organization and getting, feedback from people that work for you and from your customer base, how in the world are you going to get better? And sometimes feedback is data. I'm a Formula One fan. So
Yeah.
their feedback is simply, hey, we looked at the data after you drove your lap, and it looks like in turn 11, you're losing 2/10 of a second to this person. They call that feedback because it's just a response to what happened. It's, hey, you were slower in this corner. The data gave us the feedback. And sometimes it's people giving the feedback. And so in order to grow and get better, you have to know where you're missing. And also you have to know where you're doing well so that you can repeat those behaviors. And so you have to have a response of, hey, this is where we're, what you're doing well, where you're doing it well. And as an organization, here's where you're doing stuff well so that you can repeat that. Because if you don't get that feedback, then you might change stuff unnecessarily that was working before. And so,
Wow, that's a good perspective.
yeah, feedback is super important because it's just a response to actions that are happening. And if you don't have that both as an individual and as an organization, how in the world are you going to grow?
Yeah. Well, there was, to be transparent, a time in my life where if you said the word feedback, I would start to like break out in hives. And
Yep.
I am sure that I am not the only person that feels like that. But the whole title is Feedback is a Gift.
Yep.
So, how does viewing feedback as a gift change someone's perception of it?
Yeah. Let's do a little exercise here. If I pause this real quick and say, hey, Addie, can I give you some feedback on this interview so far? Like, what's the immediate reaction?
Well, my reaction I know is going to be different than yours, but I'm going to think, first of all, oh no, what have I done wrong? But what are you going to think if I asked you that question?
Probably something similar. I
Hmm.
view feedback as a gift, but again, it has this connotation of, and whenever people use the word feedback, it's typically negative.
Yeah.
And so when I say, hey, can I give you some feedback? Immediately shields go up.
Yeah.
It's like, what did I do wrong?
Yes.
And do I trust this person? Are they going to give me good feedback? Are they going to, do they have my best interest at heart? So feedback has this negative connotation that I really would like to change because, again, I don't believe growth can occur for an individual or an organization without feedback. So
Yeah.
feedback needs to be viewed as a gift. And I think a gift is an incredible analogy because when you think about a gift, gifts are number one, they're for good, right? Like you
Hmm.
don't give someone a gift out of like an evil heart, right? It's out of the goodness of your own heart. You get a gift for someone who you care about and you want to see their life be better as a result of that gift. And so, you know, it, I don't really have anyone that I would consider an enemy, but I'm not buying an enemy a gift, right? It's people that I know intimately. It's my
Yeah.
family. It's my close friends. Those are the people you're giving gifts to. Two, gifts are bought for a specific person or given to a specific person. Like you have them in mind whenever you got this gift. So, if I was going to
That's
give
sweet. Yeah.
you know, best man in our wedding, Daniel, big Georgia fan, right? Like
Hmm.
if I gave him a Georgia hat, that would mean a lot to him. But if I were to give, our friend Mike a Georgia hat, who's a Georgia Tech fan, that wasn't bought specifically for him, was it?
Right.
Right? So gifts are bought for specific people with them in mind.
Hmm.
Lastly, gifts are wrapped up nicely and presented with care, right? When you get someone a gift, it's
Yeah.
not just now, modern stuff's changed stuff where you might just, hey, I sent you an Amazon box. It's for you. Happy birthday. But
Right.
um,
No.
I think about traditional gifts where it's wrapped up nicely. You take your time wrapping it. You handle it with care. You make sure it's not going to be broken during travel or transportation. And then it's wrapped up nicely with a bow and it's presented at the right time, at the right moment to make their life better. Feedback is a gift, but it needs to be given as a gift in the same exact way. So you want to
Hmm.
change your perception of feedback. You need to start practicing giving feedback as a gift. And I'm going to talk through how you can receive better feedback as well. But it needs to be for a specific person out of the goodness of your heart to make their life better and wrapped up with care and handled gently, given to them at the right time and the right moment. And again, for their benefit. And so when you start to give feedback in this manner, like a gift, your perception starts to change. And
Hmm.
again, I'm going to talk through how to receive feedback where it can be a gift to you too. Even if the other person on the other side is not handling it like a gift, you can start to ask some questions to better receive
Yeah.
it as a gift to make your life better.
So tell me about how a first time employee can practice giving good feedback. Because if I'm a first time employee, I'm definitely feeling imposter syndrome. But tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, number one, it's are you in the place to give good feedback? Which is
Hmm.
a loaded question. But on the surface, if you want to start practicing giving good feedback, I'll walk through a very simple way of how to do it. For feedback to be a gift, it needs to be number one, specific. So you need to identify the what. So I'll use an example here. If we'll use this interview as an example, and we'll do positive feedback. Again, feedback is not only negative. It's not just, hey, I'm going
I
to give you
can't wait for this.
praise or feedback, right? Like
Right.
I'm just going to give you feedback. Not going to be positive feedback or negative feedback. So we'll use a positive example. If I'm being clear and identifying the specifics of what the behavior is, it's an observed behavior. Number
Mhm.
one, you're identifying an action and not a person. This especially pertains to
Yeah.
negative feedback, but you're not saying, hey, you
Yes.
were a terrible employee. You were saying, hey, this thing you did is not up to par. Like, and so I'll use a positive example. With this interview, I need to be specific. A bad piece of feedback would be great job doing this interview. Now you might think, well, that's a nice compliment. It's not feedback.
Yeah.
Because what have I identified that you can do that's repeatable to do a good job next time? Nothing. I've identified nothing.
Mhm.
If I say, hey, I liked the way you react to the way I was talking, like you smiled throughout, you never had a negative face throughout the podcast, like great job doing the podcast today. That is a lot more specific, and it
Yeah.
gives you repeatable actions of, hey, they noticed that I smiled. I had like really good nonverbal cues and feedback of like, during the interview. So that's step one, is identify the what and be specific. On the negative side, this might look like, I worked at Chick-fil-A growing up. So I use that as an example of, let's say, I'm bagging food and someone wants to give me feedback and I'm just overfilling the bags and what,
Mhm.
and so a bad piece of feedback would be, hey, you're doing a bad job bagging. Even though that's identifying an action, that's not helpful. That doesn't tell me what I'm doing wrong, right?
Right.
It would be, hey, these bags are overfull, right? That's
Mhm.
step one. Be specific. What's the behavior that needs to change if you're giving negative feedback?
That's
Identify
good.
the what.
Yeah.
Step two, explain the why. Why is this piece of feedback important? And here's a great check if the feedback is necessary or not, is if you're finding a hard time explaining why it's important, maybe you shouldn't give that piece of feedback, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's a good self check to be, when I'm going to give this feedback, and if I don't have a good why as to why it's important, then it's
Yeah.
not important, and then it's just unnecessary.
Mhm.
Because typically, I would say this is a really good encouragement for especially negative feedback. Give as many compliments as you want, but if you find yourself with negative feedback, having a hard time explaining why it's important, um, is it that valuable? Probably not. So explain why it's important. This podcast interview, we're going to go back to that piece of feedback. Hey, this is important because we're going to do 3 more of these. So,
Yeah.
like, keep up the good work, right? The bagging example. If I explain that, hey, whenever the bags are this full, it's really hard, if I'm on a window, it's really hard for me to grab this bag and hand it to the guest. And even more important, it's really hard for the guest to grab. And we had a guest drop their bag earlier. And like, that's not to like guilt them or shame them, but it's like, hey, like, I'm not just being a stickler
Right.
about
Yeah.
bags being full. The reason it's important is
Mhm.
because people can't grab the bags. And here's the thing, now with the bagging example, I'm going to assume the best intentions of them. I'm going to say, hey, I know you're probably just trying to save us money with bags. I appreciate it. Trust me, just use 2 bags. We'll
Yeah.
take the hit. It's all going to be, we can afford
Yeah.
it. Like, just use 2 bags next time. It makes it a lot easier for the guest to grab their bag. And
For
again,
sure.
do you see how different again, we'll use the negative example because that's the perception people have of feedback is,
Yeah.
if I'm talking to you on bagging, Addie, and I'm just like, hey, the bags are over full, that might hurt a little bit. But if I'm smiling and being like, hey, it's really important because it's really hard for me to grab and I don't want a guest to drop it,
Mhm.
like it lowers this, hey, I'm not attacking you. This is why it's important. And then I'll get to the third step, but it's really positive. It's not really attacking, saying, hey, you're doing a bad job bagging. I'm not mad about it. It's just, hey, can you change this one thing?
Yeah. For sure.
Identify the what, explain the why. Step 3, give an action plan moving forward. What does the person on the other side of you need to do as a result of this feedback? What needs to continue or what needs to change? So for us, it's, hey, you know, great job at the interview. Your nonverbal cues are great. Why is that important? Because we're doing more podcasts of these. What's the action plan? Keep doing this in the next 3 episodes we're going to record. That's a keep doing, the action step for positive feedback is really great because it just keep on keeping on. Great job. The negative feedback, your action plan, be specific. Again, hey, instead of, it's not just change the way you bag. That doesn't give me a specific. It's, hey,
Right.
you're overfilling the bags currently. That's the what. Why is
Mm-hmm.
this important? I can't grab them. Moving forward, use 2 bags. It's a very simple step that they can take. You give them specifics of how to correct it as
Yeah.
well. Now, overall with this, that's the method. Identify the what, explain the why, give an action plan moving forward. I'll add one more thing that's not a how to give feedback, but when and where to give feedback. Again, if feedback is as a gift, it needs to be given in a time and a place to help the person, right?
Yeah, that's good.
If it's negative feedback, as much as you can, do it in private one on one.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you have the best of intentions, when you're positive, you're actually not angry, you're smiling, and you're giving a negative piece of feedback, it can still hurt, right? And the bottom
Yeah.
line is perception is reality. As much as you can, sometimes it's impossible, as much as you can, give negative feedback in private, give positive feedback in public, praise in public. Because what
Mm-hmm.
you do then also is you tell everyone else a specific behavior that you want to see repeated. It's brilliant. You give everyone else a specific thing they can do to get the same compliment. Um, I'll add one more filter. You know what? I'm going to hold that for when we talk about business leaders. But overall, I know I talked, and this is for everybody, honestly. I know you said first time employees, but this method works for everyone. And if you're a first time employee, this is a great thing to start simple and give feedback, even to your peers. And you know what I would do? Start giving positive feedback to your peers, but practicing this method of, hey, I really noticed how you smiled with that person. That was really
Mm-hmm.
great. It made them feel important. Like, great job. It took 5 seconds, but you still practice this 3-step model. And that is something, if you can practice good feedback now, you will be such a valuable employee 10 years from now because people don't know how to give good feedback. They don't. So if you can figure this out now, I'm telling you, it is a secret sauce to make a lot of money later in your career.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. So what if other people aren't giving you that feedback, like in those steps that you just laid out? What if they aren't giving someone that? How can that employee receive, like, try to glean something good from it?
Yeah, well, I would love to teach this to every employer in the country and have them be good at feedback, and every leader and boss in the country. Masteryourfirstjob.com/work. I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
Would love to teach you this feedback model. Can't control that. So
Right.
if I'm a first time employee and I did this at my first job and I'm getting feedback that is not helpful to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just, hey, do better. I'm like, and I literally
Okay.
don't know how to do better. I'm like, what in the world? Think about the 3 steps: identify the what, explain the why, create an action plan. If you're not receiving that, could you ask questions to get that from the other person giving you feedback? So if I'm a first time employee, these are the kind of questions I might ask. So let's say again, I get not helpful, negative feedback, bad job doing this task, whatever. I can say, hey, thank you. You can attempt to receive it as a gift. Hey,
Cool.
what, like, and I don't say this sarcastically at all, what specifically about it was bad? It's like, hey, can you help them identify a specific? Ask the question, hey, what specifically about this like needs to change?
Like, how can I improve better, next time?
And not even, yes, we'll get there, but like what's the specific behavior that I was doing that was wrong, right?
Yeah.
2, you ask the question like, hey, why is that important? And again, I do not mean this sarcastically. Don't sit here and be like, if you know the reason why, don't be sitting here asking like, well, why is that important? Yeah, it's not the attitude I'm trying to convey here. But seriously, if you don't know, hey, can you just explain to me why it's important, just so I
Yeah.
know? Like, it'll help me understand better. People love
Right.
knowing the why. And like you said, what can I do moving forward? How can I be better? What's the
Mm-hmm.
next steps I can take to improve? And so you can begin to ask questions around these 3 like core ways to give and receive feedback that help you receive feedback as a gift. And what you're going to do is too, you're going to inadvertently teach the other person on the other side of you how to give better feedback so that you can actually
Yeah.
change.
Yes.
So you can ask questions to better receive feedback as a gift as well.
That's good. I want to backtrack just a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk about business leaders. How can they practice good feedback to help their organization?
Number one, be open to receiving feedback.
as a
Okay. Like
leader. Okay. Yeah.
lead by example. So again, ask others below you for feedback. I can't tell you if vulnerability breeds vulnerability. It's, Brene Brown talks about that. I open the chapter with a quote from Brene Brown in chapter 7, feedback is a gift. So when you're vulnerable enough to welcome feedback,
Mm-hmm.
you give everyone else permission to be open to feedback as well. They want to see it modeled, though. You can't tell everyone, hey, feedback is a gift. You need to receive feedback better when I give it to you, and then not accept any feedback at all. When you
Right.
open the door and especially receive feedback from people below you, you lead by example in that area. And two,
Yeah.
it's going to make you and your organization better. And so if you start asking people, again, questions of feedback, hey, can we be better in this area? What specifically can we be better about? Oh, sweet. Like, why is it important that we change that? And you're going to learn something new about your organization. It's the whole, like, you never know what's going on in the front lines until you talk to the people that are actually doing the job. They probably know how to do it better on the front lines. And so, um, practice receiving receiving feedback as a gift first before you start to give feedback as a gift. Number two, again, feedback is not positive or negative. So it's just
Right.
feedback, it's just a response. As a leader, I think you should give 4 times as much positive feedback as you do negative feedback.
Good word.
Because, if every time I pull you aside, it's, hey, I noticed this one thing, like, you need to change, even if it's the best, like, I follow the method, I have good intentions, it's one-on-one, like, all the things that make feedback good.
Right.
Still, if it's, hey, I've talked to Addie 10 times this week, and 9 times it was
Yeah.
negative feedback. The next time
Right.
I say your name, hey, Addie, can we talk for a sec?
Hives.
Again, hives. The stuff we talked about the guard going
Freeze,
up,
sweating. Yeah.
we've not changed the perception of feedback, even though we've practiced the model.
Yeah.
When you give 4 times as much positive feedback, number one, it's going to be easy
Mm-hmm.
because most business leaders have a team full of great people working for them.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes for you is a little bit of effort to notice what specifically they're doing well and call it out in front of everyone. And guess what? You're going to be known as the most optimistic, hype person who's just cheering everybody on all the time. And then the one time when I've talked to Addie 10 times this week, and one time it was, hey, real quick, let's fix this one thing. Here's why it's important. Here's what you can do moving forward. Then Addie thinks, hey, I know Jacob's on my team because I've heard him call
Yes,
out
that's important.
specific stuff 9
Mm-hmm.
times this week. He has my best interest at heart, and he pulled me aside to call out the one negative thing, and no one else knows about it. And now I can fix it. And then you fix it, and I compliment you about it and give you more positive feedback. I mean,
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the good that does for a culture and for individuals in an organization if you just simply gave 4 times as much positive feedback as you do negative feedback. And that does not mean ignore stuff that needs to be fixed in your organization. But again, I think that will be the minority. Maybe that's a few bad apples that you're having to pull aside all the time for a negative feedback. But for the
Mm-hmm.
majority of people in your organization, I'm telling you, easiest secret sauce. Just start complimenting people and be specific.
Yeah.
Then again, you open the door for others to receive feedback as a gift. I think those are the 1-2 punch.
Yes. Well, tell us a personal story of yours, wherever in the restaurant, at a different job of yours, about how feedback helped shape your career now.
So I worked as a corporate trainer for the support center at Chick-fil-A, the corporate office. Lifelong dream of mine to work for the Chick-fil-A corporate, and
Yeah.
got to do it. It was amazing. And I came in telling myself I was really good at feedback, and like, I'm good at giving it. I'm good at receiving it. I don't take things personally.
Right. All that.
You can correct me. All the things that I feel like everyone says who then receives negative feedback and takes offense to it, like I did. So I did like my first. It was the first time I trained. We had a program called Licensee. It was really cool. We basically live streamed the training from the test kitchen at the Chick-fil-A corporate office, and we had a whole production crew with like cameras, lights, mic, the whole thing.
Yes. Awesome.
It was
Yeah.
really cool. You felt like a movie star, and like, I'm like, looking back, I'm like, man, we did some cool stuff.
Yeah.
So it was my first time training this. I'd watched someone else do the same exact session that I was going to do. I had their notes, I had everything. I prepped the same way they did, and I did it. And I was like, that wasn't bad, except for the fact that I was 10 minutes short on time. And I was like, yeah, 10 minutes on a 50-minute session isn't that bad, I thought. So whenever I was a part of this team, I mean, we got so much feedback. Everything we did, it was immediately you do it, and then it's like, sweet, let's go get feedback for the next 15 minutes.
Ooh.
Everything we did, again,
Yeah.
good and bad. It was just, and we would practice, we called it the SPY method, and it was like self peer you. So, they'd ask you first, like, hey, so what did you do well? And you say it, and then they ask your peers, okay, what did Jacob do well? And then the person leading the feedback would say what you did well. Then it was, so everyone said nice stuff. I was like, yeah, that was pretty good. And like, I think I did this. And
I know, right?
it was like, okay. And they were like, okay, so what would you change? And I'm like, well, I was short on time, and I think that's about it. And then we went on for like 5 more minutes of giving negative feedback about my session. And I'm sitting there like, wow, this is a lot longer than the positive feedback about my session. That's not good. And here I am, the person saying, oh yeah, I'm good at receiving feedback. And I was mad at the end of that, of like, man, I really thought I did everything right. But, and this is nothing against them, I'm like, they helped me of like, hey, here's what you can do moving forward. Part of my action plan was like, hey, it came across as robotic. My session was robotic. And it was because I literally had used someone else's notes. I tried to emanate them in the session, and it wasn't me. They're like, your personality didn't come across. And why is that important? That's really important for people to connect with you for training, especially because it's virtual, right? Like, I'm not with them one-on-one. I've got to be as animated and, I'll say, as myself as possible, so that I look comfortable and seem confident. And I didn't come across as comfortable or confident because I was trying to be somebody else my session. And I completely changed the session, practiced my timing to get it right. And again, I took pride after that. Like, moving forward, I don't say this to be arrogant, I was the king of timing. I loved ending those sessions. We had like a countdown timer you could see like below the camera. Yeah. And when I would like send it to the next person on camera as the clock hit 0 exactly. Like, when I tell you, these are like 55-minute sessions, and I'm getting it down to the second on timing. Loved doing it. Took pride in it. And 2, I ended up like adding a lot more of myself into the session. My favorite thing was, I would use an analogy, Jimmy's and Joe's and X's and O's. And I mean, every business it pertains to is, hey, you've got to have, in football, you got to have the Jimmys and Joes, like the right people. You got to recruit the best players, and the X's and O's. You got to have a good playbook. Like, you have to have both to be successful. And in business, it's, you've got to have the best people. You also have to have the best system. Whenever you do both well, like, you have a lot of success. And I would put on my coach's hat, and I would, pull out my Georgia visor on set, and like, let's put our coach's hat on. We got to have our Jimmys and Joes and X's and O's. And I would identify the Jimmys and Joes and X's and O's, when it came to that piece of restaurant material, which was fun. And doing it, I had more fun doing it. The audience had more fun listening to it. My timing was perfect. And it was all because I got really good feedback, and I got feedback from people that cared about my success.
Yes, that's the key.
Right. And they cared enough to say, hey, this is robotic. And not only do we have a job and we have to serve this audience well, but like, you are not coming across as comfortable and confident, and we know you are. So like, bring that out in your session.
So good. Yeah.
And after that, and I saw myself improve, I began to see feedback as a gift, because I was like, you know what? I hated to hear that at the time, but that was really nice. And then guess what? I look forward to feedback sessions, because again, it was like 4 times as much positive as it was negative. And then it was like, hey, real quick, when you talk about this one thing, just change this. And it was like, sweet, that's an easy change. Let's go have fun. And so I'm grateful that I got to work in an organization and in a culture that valued feedback and did it well.
Right.
And that really had an impact on me. And that's why I wrote an entire chapter about it in the book, because I've seen what happens when it's taken seriously and when it's held up with a lot of importance. And I truly believe that feedback is a gift.
Yes. Well, where can people find more? Where can, all over the place today, I guess. Where can people find out more about Master Your First Job?
Yeah, Master Your First Job is out now. It's 130 pages. You mentioned this before, but it's a, I don't know if you can
such
see there.
An easy read.
Thin book. The audiobook, as far as like, hey, people ask me, how long does it take to read it? The audiobook is 2 hours and 57 minutes. And so I felt like easy. I took my time reading that. So it is well doable to do it in under 2 weeks if you just read 15 minutes a day. So it is a very easy read. Again, I wrote this for first-time employees, but if you're a business owner listening, I think it has some secret sauce to help you manage your young employees.
Right? Yeah.
I think everyone's trying to figure out with changing workforces, like, hey, how do we manage Gen Z? How do we, Gen Alpha is about to come into the workforce. What do they want in a job?
Yeah.
And it's not just pay. People like wanting to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And how do we do that? And I think this is a secret sauce to help get the most out of young people, but also help them with their development. And if you're a business owner, this is such an easy buy for a young employee, because the paperback's $10, the ebook's 99 cents. Like, who wouldn't want to spend $1 to help their employee's life better for a first-time employee? $1. So again, I want this to make an impact. So you can get the book at masteryourfirstjob.com and read more about the book there. I'd love to get it in your hands. So again, check it out at masteryourfirstjob.com. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. Take care.